a face too. There he is.
There's the face.
He has a face, not just a butt. He's just looking out the window here. We're gonna have an interesting chat this hour because I don't know about you, Ames, but I've had some pretty messed up family, biological family stuff, and uh, yeah, Susan Marsh is going to talk to us a little bit about, where you belong and your roots. And, as somebody that doesn't have a whole lot of that from a family perspective, I certainly get that from you and other friends is, it is hard to find out where do you belong and where are you from when, in my case, half of my family is not from a place that anybody wants to be a part of. So,
Maybe
uh,
we should call this episode When Your Roots Are Set on Fire, because that's kind of what it feels like. And you're like, well, shit, now what?
yes, yes, when they're set on fire and when you grew up in those environments,
Yeah.
right, where you didn't fit into where you culturally belonged. So Susan has a lot of really deep thoughts on that. So I'm excited to talk to her about it.
All right. Sounds good. Let's bring her in.
Well, welcome back, Susan Marsh. You introduced a concept last time you were on. You're a regular contributor, and this sense of belonging and where you're from, and the culture around that. And you really got me thinking about, you know, half of my family was great. The other half of my family, batshit crazy. And where do I belong? And what happens if where you're supposed to belong doesn't fit? So, a lot of deep questions today. Thank you for coming back. I'm sitting in a campground and the flies are driving me crazy. But yeah, I mean, do you want to kind of remind us of what you're kind of going through as an adoptive kid trying to get connected to your roots, and then we'll start from there?
Yeah, I actually can. I guess for me, I never really thought about culture because I'm white. So to me, it didn't really have any kind of meaning, except for what kind of stood up for me was I'm really tall and my family is really short. So I always thought that there was some kind of oddness about that. It's only when got married and I started having children, and my husband is mixed. He's Italian with Indigenous ancestry. And then I started seeking my own biological side because I thought, oh, like, what am I? It's kind of like I'm a Heinz 57 or something. So I knew I have freckles, so I knew I had to be Irish and Scottish. But the other part, I was kind of like, everyone says, oh, you look Scandinavian stuff. Anyway, so then I learned that I was Croatian, and then I knew nothing about it. And of course, as you know, when you have children, everyone says, oh, they look like so and so. But I didn't have any legacy of like, oh, they look like my side of the family. It's just that they were all on my husband's side. So it kind of gave me a deeper dive into like, who am I? And then just trying to, learn about my family's ancestry because it was an important one. Because I'm very close with my mother-in-law, who's Indigenous and went through 2 residential schools. That's kind of the catalyst of how I I started being curious about myself.
What did you find out?
Well, I found out that I'm Croatian, and my height naturally comes from both sides of my family, and I am Irish, and I have a little bit of Scottish in me, so I'm kind of like I'm more European than I am anything else, so it's kind of interesting.
Have you
I'll
been
let,
able,
sorry.
I was gonna say, have you been able to trace back other family members? Like, have you been able to look at the family tree at all?
Yes. So on the Croatian side, it's a little bit more difficult because they don't belong in the ancestry. I don't know why that part of the world doesn't really buy into the ancestry. But I've followed my ancestry on my the Croatian side pretty deep. Um, but I have more legs on the Irish and Scottish. I'm really, really Irish. And of course, some Irish people tended to go to Scotland and Britain too. But I think it all started with Ireland. So I'm really Irish and Croatian.
Maybe we're related.
I'm sure because we talked to Kimothy. I'm from Cork. I'm part of the Kennedy clan, but not the rich Kennedy clan from the US.
No,
You know
no.
what I mean? So
I went to Cork and to Wicklow County and to Dublin when I was 21 in the Who Am I?
yeah.
That. But before we talk about the sense of belonging, can you just talk a little more about you've been very active in protecting the culture and the heritage of your children and they're Indigenous, but you're right, when we're, white gals, we think from, one of the islands over on the other side of the sea. It's not
Yeah.
really like a lot of attention is paid to that. So what did you learn from your kids and from your husband that inspired this search to begin with for white girls?
Well, I go back to my mother-in-law. Like I before I married my husband, I was friends with her daughter. We're best friends. So I kind of learned about the Indigenous culture there. I knew she was part of two residential schools. So I was very close. That was like my second family anyway. And I'm a very curious person. So I kept asking because I never learned about it in school. Like you don't learn that, you know, that they gave, blankets of, of smallpox and stuff to Indigenous children to keep them warm when they just tried to erase them. Like there's lots of things I learned that was horrible. And I thought, oh my God, like, you know, uh, how did we not know this? And then I want my children to be proud of all of who they are. So the Italian side's easy, like they're always happy and celebratory, but it's almost like this black mark on the Indigenous side, which I feel that shouldn't be right. So I want to celebrate it and learn and wrap myself in that and be an advocate for that, for their voices, because they kind of are, they look more white than they do, and so to them they are kind of whitewashed into feeling like they don't belong, and I want them to belong. I want them to belong to all the cultures that are related to them. Just like for me, it kind of catapults me to figure out, like, I need to find out for myself who I am. I don't even know about the Croatian side. It's kind of interesting. And then if you look at it, they were enslaved by the Italians and stuff prior. So it's very interesting how I've been kind of, if you kind of look at your ancestry and stuff, like how you kind of fit into this world and what your purpose is and what your knowledge base and what you can do to make the world a better place. So I guess it's all that. It's like it's kind of easier, and I guess as an adoptive child that I'm an adult, that it's easier to put my emphasis on them because it's all about the next generation, but it also leaves me with this curiosity.
Hmm.
How do your kids feel about the curiosity? Are they also curious? Are you
Yeah.
curious by like because you were curious about your own and that's kind of who you are, or are they also curious and you're kind of helping them get to the bottom of it?
um that's a good question. So I guess, so if I related to my husband first, because in his upbringing, they really emphasize the Italian, right? Because again, that was kind of front and center. And so he has a company and he does work in the Indigenous space. And I'm so very proud of him for that, which gets him connected back to his roots. This is what I keep telling him. Like, you know, it's such important work to work with your culture that you really didn't have a hand in growing up in the way, you learned the Italian way. You didn't really, you knew some parts of it, but it was also part wrapped up in shame. So it's not like you want to go walking around saying, yeah, I'm Indigenous, because there's a lot of biases on what that means, right? And even my daughter, my middle child, who went to high school about 10 years ago, she was made fun of when she revealed that she was Indigenous. They said, "Oh, you must have an alcoholic parent, and you're going nowhere. You rely on the land. You rely on the government to give you money. Like all that stuff is not true." You know what I mean? And that is passed down. So for me, I want them to be as proud of their Italian heritage as they are Croatian and Indigenous. Like that is all of who they are. So their curiosity is maybe because I talk about it quite often, like almost daily actually, um, because I find these facts out and I say, hey, did you realize this? And so I guess the curiosity has rubbed off on them. How's that? And my husband is warming up to his identity as an Indigenous man, uh, propping up his the Indigenous voices within his community by the work he does, right? So
And brace yourself, Amy. I'm going to get a little woohoo. And you know that, I tease you about that sometimes. But if you're going to believe in the fact that we have ancestral trauma, or that, we have inherited in our DNA certain things from our bloodline, we can't sort of pick and choose and then say, oh, but I don't like these people and that's not where I belong. There has to be a certain amount of recognition that that's part of your cellular structure, right? Like, what do you?
Well, it's epigenetics, right? So they're studying how it gets transferred, how specifically trauma gets transferred down in the generations, which is
Yeah.
why all us millennials are breaking all the generational trauma because I think we finally hit a lot of like a group of people that are done with it. But I found that really interesting as well, that you're built a certain way, your genes are a certain way, and it's a part of you, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of like
plus
not go too deep into that, but
right, plus behaviors and stuff are passed down, right? So if your
yeah.
parent hadn't dealt with their trauma, then it's continuously passed down, right? And at some point, you kind of have to put a stopgap in there. And that's kind of, I feel, I'm a Gen X, not a millennial. Sorry, I'll just have to tell you that. So we are the generation that really is not going to put up with that any longer. We have taken on too much on our shoulders, and we're saying no. And most of us are kind of in our menopause where we don't care, that we are just going to challenge. And so I think that for me, it rides on my shoulder that I don't want to pass down any more trauma. I'm sure they're going to inherit something because, you learn along the way. You trip and you fall and you get up and you try and go a different path so you don't fall. But the effort is there and the wanting is there. So
Yeah, well, it's important to have that intent, right? Like there's lots
yeah.
of us just like really we're teaching ourselves, we're reparenting, we're teaching ourselves, we're dealing with it in real time while we're also dealing with the next generation and raising the next generation. So there's got to be a little bit of flex in there to be able to understand all of your crap and our crap, my crap, their crap.
Yeah.
And then, also try to reparent that, but also reparent or parent differently than what you were taught.
Yeah, and then you're also trying to fact find. So that was the other thing. The curiosity
Yeah.
allows me, like, God, you went down that damn path the whole time. Like everyone goes down that one path. What happens if I veer off and, read some books here or talk to you? That's why I love about culture, because um, it gives you a different pathway to discover. That's probably what I would say.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
I find, because my maternal side just is a toxic wasteland. But I am kind of coming to grips with the fact that you can't pick and choose in terms of you know, not paying attention to it. So I've done a pretty deep dive into what all that nonsense was about from a mental health perspective, and realizing that, okay, it's in me 100%. Therefore, what can I do in my behaviors to change the trajectory of that particular family? Like there's no getting away from it any more than, you know, on my dad's side, wonderful family. On my dad's side, he did all the ancestry.com stuff and found out that our family once owned slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And was related to some governor who signed the Declaration of Independence. That's how far back my dad went. And that, of course, was just abhorrent to me. But we have to realize that if we're going to accept that there's, you know, trauma that goes back generations, that we also have to accept that we're partly made of that stuff,
Yep.
you know, and then how do we deal with it? Amy's better at this stuff than I am. I just like to like close the door and pretend it doesn't, you know, I can't see it. No, I can't see it.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite. I kind of like to kick in that door.
I'm like
Um,
Susan on that.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I'm like the way I am. It probably
Because you're Croatian.
yeah,
The
well, my biological father is he was a criminal lawyer, so it's almost like I don't know, I have that and then my adoptive mother, she just didn't put up with stuff. She taught me to stand on my own and to not accept. So here I am. And you know, at first I was like, oh God, but I kind of like that. And I do it, my intent is always for the better. It's not like, you know, so I have, you know, I'm authentic in why I'm doing those kind of things. And that's why I guess the culture kind of piece, when you wrap it up in, like you said, you discovered all that past stuff. But it's interesting when you kind of put it towards today and then deal with your trauma that you've experienced growing up and where that hurt really started when you're young, and how if you don't see it, that thing kind of perpetuates through your whole life, you know? Um, and then
yeah.
as you're curious, you find out these, you know, different podcasters, books, listening to people's experiences kind of make you think and make you change perspectives or try something new, you know?
I
So,
think that once you see something, if you're interested in kind of, I don't know, like self-discovery, self-improvement, self whatever, once you see it, it's hard to unsee. And so then you get curious and you kind of go down, I think
yeah.
I've been down a lot of rabbit holes. You're looking for the information, but then when you're down there, then you find something else and it links something there. And then you realize you're not crazy. And then you go down another hole. And then it's like, oh, wait, I really wasn't, right? There's so many different backgrounds to this conversation. People come in it from different, people come in from different types of trauma, come from cultural experiences, things like that. Like they're all different ways into this conversation, but I think that if it's of interest and you start digging, some of it is just to like find yourself.
Well, when you were saying the self-help, like even that name, self-help, it's not
Mhm.
actually self-help. It should be called self-discovery
Yeah.
because you don't need help, you just need guidance and experience. So yeah, yeah.
And the sense of belonging question, though, is
Mhm.
so interesting for me because I had on the one side of the family a sense of alienation.
Yep.
So when I started to, as an adult, seek out my own sense of belonging, I very quickly took a borrowed phrase from one of my mentors that I was going to seek out my family of choice. Very different than current family members or ancestry. It was a very conscious decision in my early 20s that I would build a family of choice out of people I wasn't blood related to whatsoever. and surround myself by people who were loving and caring and didn't abuse their children. And, you know, what we're talking about here today, I think it all fits in together, but it's also strangely the opposite in that I don't want to be from that place of a toxic ancestry. I can recognize it, sure, but that's not where I want to live in the here and now. Where I want to live in the here and now is with people who have respect and love for me. And I have that feeling for them too.
So I have a question for you then. I know you're supposed to ask questions, but then when you say that, it kind of triggered me to think like your sense of belonging should be the sense of belonging to yourself first. You don't need others to be belonged to. You add them afterwards. Like I'm just, even for myself, Kimothy, being an adoptive person, I never had a sense of self. It was always like this fabricated, oh, I belong here because I was adopted. And even doing like like, you know, your family tree, it was a very difficult process during school because I had two trees, right? So what I'm learning in my early 50s or 50s that like I have to really belong to myself first. And once you have that, those people that you say that are your chosen ones, they just flock to you. The rest is still a part of who you are, but it's like a small piece, you know? I think that we lose sight of the ownership of ourselves first. That's kind of what
That's
I
I'm processing that as you're saying it. And I will say I don't know if there's always flocking. There's a similar word that some people feel when I at this started to find my true sense of self. Some people just don't come along for the journey
That's right.
because who you are now isn't who you were when you were 21 years old. And you know, I respect that. It's like, okay, I'm not sorry, there's a hornet that's been trying to get me. uh I'm just not everybody's cup of tea. And I used
And
to take that very seriously, like, and was hurt, you know,
Yeah, but
what did I do? And now it's like, okay.
you've reversed it though, because a lot of us have come from the fact of being people pleasers and trying to be everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
And now when you've poured that cup of tea and smashed it on the floor, you're like, okay, I'm going to please myself, and whoever wants to hang out, you know, we'll evaluate and decide whether you can stay or not.
Well, and then that's just Susan's, you know, deep point in this hour is the sense of who you are. And that's when, to me, you get rid of everybody else's expectations. And I think that that's kind of the benefit of the aging process too, is you're starting to say, no, this is who I am and this is where I belong. And I was just learning that in the early days. So I was doing what I was trained, literally trained to do, you know,
and then
how to behave, how to be this, how to, you know, basically my parents were training me into what they wanted me to be.
right. And you have to also add an extra layer. So the
Oh,
extra layer that we all have, because we're the three, is that we're women. So, you know, we've been lied to about what our position is and how we act and how we speak and how dare we do this? How dare we challenge? How dare we disagree? I think that being a woman is a provocation for all. Like we're disruptors just by our mere presence.
yeah, and in some countries far worse than
Yeah,
other. Uh,
yeah.
you know, I still can't believe that we live in a world in this day and age where, um, well, I won't pick on any particular religion, but where some women just have no rights whatsoever. They're just breeding machines, and
Well,
you know.
yeah. Well, I don't think any religion really is is for women, right?
Yeah. I, I haven't heard of anything other than maybe Wicca that puts women at the front of the class. That's for sure. That's for sure. So, what do you do with all this knowledge? You've been studying this topic for as far as I know, for a couple of years now, when you started to do a deep dive into your own, where are you in the journey, and where do we all get to if we kind of do a little bit more self-reflection?
Wow. Okay. I don't think that I think it's because I'm new into it, like, yes, a couple of years and stuff, and I have to figure out where it is because I have to be happy. Just like I sort of said that being happy with a sense of self, right? I'm not 100% there yet. Because you have the world kind of putting pressure on you to be a certain way. And what happens when you don't follow that narrative, you end up being kind of outcasted. So you and I are pretty similar, Kimothy, because we do voice kind of, I'll say unfairness or point out or pull back the shades. Uh, and so I don't know where, I just want to help. So it's kind of like I took a step into doing these podcasts when you invite me and trying to make myself vulnerable, which I only have these one-on-ones with people. I never generally kind of spill it all out, but I feel that it's my responsibility to give back to the world in helping in any way others. So that's kind of where I'm in my journey is where I'm needed, I will go. Um, Big topics for me is the treatment of women. I'm not satisfied with that. And then about, culture. Culture plays a very important part in the world. And you can see what's happening right now. There's war happening everywhere. It's because people aren't, coming to a tolerance of differences. And then I guess just trying to be as authentic to myself and self-accepting. It's like, I guess that's where I'm at.
There's
It's a beautiful way to look at it. I'm reminded of my mother-in-law was a Newfoundlander, and it still is a Newfoundlander. I think she's still hiking in her 80s. And when she greeted somebody, because we were always, my ex-husband and I were always dragging people home for Christmas dinners and stuff like that. And she greeted people, not how are you? She would greet people with, so who are you? So imagine when you've just met somebody having to fill in that sentence. And that's kind of what we're talking about today is how do you define yourself? Because she would just, now who are you? I'm a daughter, I'm a mother, how do you answer that question? And sparked, amazing. She loved to talk to people. Like you couldn't go grocery shopping with that woman because you'd be like 2 hours because she'd stop and talk to everybody. But I thought, what a great question. Now, who are you?
So the Indigenous people, you know what they do? So when Paul has meetings with the Indigenous groups, they ask you, where'd you come from? Or how'd you get here?
Oh, how'd you get here?
So imagine, so you would say, oh, I just took a bus or I took a car. No, no, no. They want to know from the very inception on how you got there. I
I,
thought that, so that is this tie-in to understand who you really are.
I
It's
think my answer would be blood, sweat, and tears, man. Blood, sweat, and tears. That's how I got here.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
A lot of that. Now, Amy, who are you?
I'm still figuring it out at this point. I
Yeah,
don't have a solid answer at this point. I'm a regenerative space. Recreation at the moment. It's hard. That's a hard question to answer
who are you?
because who you are in this given time period is not who I feel I am. It's like where you came from is still sort of there, but not where you're going, if that makes any sense. Like I'm in this middle ground of like, who am I?
Well, yeah, and there's some picking and choosing, and maybe with Susan's theory, there shouldn't be, but my dad, I was at the graves of my grandparents in Moose Jaw recently, and you know, my dad was a really, really good human being. So I take that and the lessons that he taught me. I reject everything that my mother did. She taught me a lot of stuff, but not much of it was good. And so when you look at sort of the tapestry of your life, if I'm picking up what Susan's laying down, is you build your own tapestry, and that's who you are.
Yeah. But also taking the triggers and knowing that they have a part in it too, because it forces you to go down a different path. So what I'm saying to you, Kimothy, is your mother taught you stuff, like you said, and it catapulted you to find new direction. So it's not like, so there was some good in what the bad happened to be, if that makes sense. I look at any experience that I have had that has been negative, and I look at what lessons am I learning from that. And it's not the lesson of hurt and of resilience and all that stuff. It's like, what did I learn about myself in that process? See, again, I'm a deep thinker. So sometimes it's, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I kind of do along the way. I kind of figure it out, or try and figure out what it's teaching me. And in my early, when I was shy and young and things would happen, I remained quiet, and to a point that I couldn't be quiet any longer. So again, negative, it kind of snowballs into, now I say, F it. Like, I'm going to shed light on what I feel is marginalization of women, culture, etc., like that. So that's kind of how I feel.
Good for you. I told Amy this story, but to validate, because I'm not that deep a thinker. I'm a, what are we doing and how are we doing it? But when I met a cousin that it's a long story, but that I didn't really have the accurate information on in Texas when I did the first leg of this cross continent trip. And I was really skeptical. And our mothers were sisters. So we're biological all the way. And I could not believe in myself, as someone who might be a little on the callous side, how I bonded with him so quickly. And it was like, he's 4 or 5 years older than I am, so he's in his early 60s, and it was like we'd known each other our entire lives. We were separated from each other at a very young age because of family strife, and I felt immediately this kindred spirit. I mean, we had to compare a whole bunch of notes to figure out how we got to this place in time with our family history. But I went back to Texas after I'd been in California because we just got along so well. And the only way that I can explain that is we lead very different lives. He's a very powerful corporate executive. And the only way that I could explain it is that it was in our blood. It's in our blood, you
Yeah.
know? And that's the only time I can really explain the, now who are you, is I know for a fact that I'm related to him on a cellular level.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's true. That's absolutely true, because I was removed from all that. And when I met my biological side, that connection, which they're strangers, you felt connected. It was the weirdest experience. So
It
I
is.
concur what you're saying. It makes total sense, which I
Yeah.
had no reference point. I had no reference of what that meant. So, but also you'll find along the way, you meet people that you can still have that same connectedness too, but it's not on a cellular level, it's almost on a knowing level. Or
Well, and it takes time,
yeah,
because when you have a family of choice, you're developing a relationship and sharing your history, and you got to cover a lot of territory when you're our age, but not Amy's age, she's the young one. But you have to develop that relationship. This was a cellular experience, it felt like to me, and also someone that genuinely understood how miserable it was for us to be children on that side of the family. Again, unlike him, I had a really good other side of the family.
Mm.
So that kind of balanced it out. He didn't. But the sisters were just, uh, just not good human beings. So I'll leave that at that.
But you both are successful. That's interesting too. Like you both ended up being very successful despite what you both went through. It's interesting.
Well, and kudos to him, because again, he didn't have my dad. But I did find it really interesting that uh, as we compared notes over a dinner table, because keep in mind, like, we didn't know that each had the same experience.
Mm.
The sisters took us apart when we were young. And then to find out, which also scared me, because there's a mental health aspect to that. Both sisters were not well. And I thought, oh God, it's in the bloodline. Oh God, it's in the bloodline. And Amy and I have talked about this a lot, is it's okay if it's in the bloodline, you just need to pay attention to it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep, it's there. That's what I said. Epigenetics. It's there.
A lot about epigenetics. Can you just like tell people that are maybe watching this for the first time about what your understanding is?
I mean, I am no in-depth epigenetics person, but my general understanding is that in our genes, the things turn off or on based on what's transferred to us, right? And so, um, my thought process is that as I go through my own trauma and sort out my own crap, things change for Eva. Like things, I was already sorting out my stuff, right? And then Eva came along, she's 7. So things have already turned off or on from the previous generation, is my general understanding. I'm not an expert by any means. I think it's just really interesting to learn that, like, it does change. And, I think that that's also one of those things where, you come out of situations like this and you're like, oh my God, am I a good mom? Like, what is happening? Right. And, people have told me, for the sheer fact of asking the question means that you're a decent mom and a decent human being. And I was like, well, that's fair. But it's encouraging to me that in my own journey, even though it's been very difficult, I've been able to change it enough, I think, that, to Susan's point, there's still going to be ups and downs. There's still other stuff that happens. You talked about triggers. I get triggered all the time, and you just, you deal with it like a good human being would deal with it. You deal with it, and then you go and talk about it, or you apologize, or you do whatever, right? Which is not what I was raised in. And so by already being changing that at such a young level, I feel like it will then carry through her to her children if she wants children, and then it keeps switching those switches till maybe at some point down the line, this trauma, the generational trauma, will be washed out, is the hope.
Well, if you think about it, my dad's uncle, so 2 generations separated, from men coming back from the war and being just told around the neighborhood that they had shell shock, and then quite honestly engaging in self-destructive behavior to deal with shell shock, because nobody knew anything. We're only 2 generations away from now being able to talk on a podcast like this about
Yeah.
trauma, about PTSD, about complex PTSD. So, I'm not usually the I'm an optimist, but I'm not usually a, you know, over the top kind of optimist. I think that we're getting better as humanity moves forward.
Yeah,
Susan, save me here.
Well, um, I'm going to say that as women's voices rise, compassion and the feminine energy is going to help solve this. But right now, like, I don't know, because look at what's happening in the world. That's what's kind of scary. Um, I don't know. I can't, I'm not so optimistic as you are about how the world has changed, because some of the stuff that I had experienced hasn't really changed much to from years ago to now. And I think until people have that compassion and empathy in their viewpoint, it's not going to be very pretty, personally.
Well, but to Kim's point as well, right? Like even talking about this, opening communications generally is one of the ways to start the change. And
Yep.
we don't have enough experience underneath our belt. Yes, things are not going great right now, and I get that. But as a society, we don't have enough experience. It's something that we talk about with seniors care and stuff like that. Like we don't have, long-term care has only been really around since the 50s. And like at that point, it was also slash a sane asylum, slash this, slash that. And like the families I deal with, we don't have enough generational experience to actually be comfortable in decision making, be actually comfortable with it, right? It's still very common for people to say, I put my mom in a home, right? Which is like not really what it's like now. And so we still need to grow through our generations to continue to heal and to continue to get far enough that things can really change on a big scale. I think that the stuff that's happening in the world currently is discouraging. And I think that that just means that we have to be a bit louder.
Yeah, I agree. So I agree with what you're saying about those kind of baby steps forward and be able to talk about it. Because even mental health, like say 20, 30 years ago, that was very shameful. You
Mhm.
can't cope, you're going crazy, you should go to the mental institute. Like, and that's just for like generalized anxiety. So it is great, but it's the parts that are like weaponized, like what you hear that's happening out there. And I don't want to give any platform for that, but what all that stuff that's happening out there, people have more knowledge about it, but some are using it in destructive and political agendas. And so for me, being authentic with a podcast, and people can choose to listen to it or not, women's voices being amplified, cultural voices, men, women, what, all the marginalized voices need to be elevated so we can learn from each other. And I don't want to say make the world a better place, but really that's kind of the thing
That's the
I'm.
point.
Yeah, yeah. Like I want to be happy. Like I want to have different variety of friends. I love people. Like I'm that person like you described your aunt or whatever going to the grocery store. I'm in there for hours because I talk to people. Like I love learning about other people, and that whole question of where you came from or how'd you get here. I use that now because I want to know like where you came from. Like you're authentic, I came from BC, or I came from so and so, and my background is this, and oh, that's interesting. So anyway, and I love
The I
it.
know we're almost out of time, but this isn't entirely my original idea. I was reading something and it had me kind of formulate this concept that the reason why, particularly some countries right now, are having this strange political experience is maybe this is men's last gasp. And that's why they're fighting back because women are going to take over the world.
That's very true. And I told you, I think my girlfriend, she's a doctor of anthropology, and she had warned me about 20 years ago. She goes, when there's too many men on the planet, war breaks out. So it's very interesting if you
Mhm.
look at the scientific kind of thing. I don't know. I just think we just need to be a little kinder and give a little bit more grace. That's really.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Well, Susan, as always, a pleasure to have you. Thank you for coming on with us and chatting about all of the difficult stuff that we like to talk about.
I, I have a 2 hour drive ahead of me right now, and it's going to be like for 2 hours, I'm going to be having these deep thoughts, deep thoughts.
She's gonna have to call one of us because she doesn't think that deep, she said. So we're gonna have to pull her in, I'm pretty sure.
Well,
Yeah.
thank God I don't have it in my head anymore. Now it's on Kimothy's plate. So, thank you for me unloading. I appreciate that.
Oh dear. Well, hopefully we've helped someone today. Susan, thanks for coming on. If you're watching us, please on YouTube, like, subscribe, and notify to get notified of our next episode. And until next time, see you on the Inner Shift.